You're listening to the Archetype Effect, conversations redefining power, purpose and leadership for women and the coaches who guide them. I'm Ros Cardinal, leadership coach and creator of the Women's Leader Archetypes. Together we'll explore the real stories, the research and reflections that help women rise with clarity and authentic power. There's a moment many women recognise, though they don't always have language for it. It's not the moment they burn out. It's not the moment they fail. It's not even the moment they decide to leave. It's the moment they go quiet. They're still there, still competent, still delivering. Their calendar is full, their inbox is busy, their reputation is intact. But something has shifted. They stop offering their thinking early in meetings. They wait to see how the room is leaning before they speak. They notice themselves saying, "I'll come back to that," more often than they used to. They feel a subtle pulling back, not from work, but from themselves. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. From the inside, it feels like standing half a step behind your own life. What makes this moment so difficult to name is how ordinary it looks. There's no announcement, no obvious turning point. She still shows up, still contributes when asked, still does what's required of her. But internally, she's calculating more than she used to. Is this worth saying? Will this land well? Is it safer to wait? She notices herself scanning the room before she speaks, tracking reactions, adjusting tone. Not because she lacks conviction, but because she's learned slowly that conviction carries consequence. There's often a grief here that's hard to articulate, not grief for a role or for a title, but for a version of herself who used to speak without bracing. She remembers what it felt like to offer her ideas freely, to lead without rehearsing, and to trust that her authority would be met, not negotiated. And she doesn't know exactly when that changed, which makes it tempting to doubt herself. Maybe she's imagining it. Maybe she's just tired. Maybe this is what leadership is meant to feel like. So she adapts. She becomes more measured, more contained, more strategic. From the outside, this can look like maturity. From the inside, it often feels like self-distancing. And because nothing is wrong enough to justify a reaction, she doesn't name what she's losing, even to herself. She just keeps going, quieter than before. And what's most confusing about this moment is it doesn't come with drama. There's no crisis, no collapse, no clear reason you can point to and say, that's when it happened, which makes it easy to dismiss. You tell yourself you're tired or distracted or just going through a phase. But underneath, there's often a quiet knowing. Something in me no longer feels safe leading the way I used to. If you've ever wondered how someone strong can disappear without actually leaving, this episode is for you. Because this isn't burnout, and it isn't a lack of confidence. It's something quieter and far more misunderstood. To understand what's happening in moments like this, we need to start with the sovereign. The sovereign is not about dominance. She's not about hierarchy. She's not about being the loudest voice in the room. The sovereign is about authorship. She's the part of you that knows who you are, independent of role, title, or approval. She's the inner authority that says, this matters, this doesn't, this is mine to lead. The sovereign is not confidence. Confidence is fragile. It rises and falls depending on context, feedback, and circumstance. The sovereign is deeper than that. She's the place from which confidence emerges. When the sovereign is present, decisions feel anchored. Values feel non-negotiable. Direction feels internally authorised rather than externally granted. In my archetypal model, the sovereign sits at the top of the diamond, not because she's better than the others, but because she orients them. When the sovereign is steady, the warrior knows what she's fighting for. The wise woman knows which knowledge matters and when to share it. The tribe builder knows which relationships to prioritise and which to release. But when the sovereign becomes unstable, everything beneath her starts to wobble. This is where many conversations about women and leadership go off track. We assume that when a woman hesitates, pulls back, or stops speaking up, she's lost confidence. So we offer encouragement, visibility strategies, leadership presence training. But often what's been lost isn't confidence, it's authority. And those are not the same thing. Let's return to the woman from the opening. She's capable. She's experienced. She's still seen as reliable. Nothing about her competence has suddenly disappeared, but over time, small things have happened. Her decisions have been questioned, not openly, but subtly. Her judgment has been second-guessed, politely. She's been asked to bring others along, be more collaborative, or soften her approach. Sometimes she's overruled in the moment. Sometimes later, quietly without discussion. She's given responsibility without real power, accountability without authorship. And none of this happens once, it happens in increments. A meeting where her contribution is acknowledged but not acted on. A decision is reframed by someone else. A moment when she realises her role carries risk but not authority. And what makes this so destabilising is that it's rarely explicit. There's nothing to push back against cleanly. Nothing you can point to and say, this is not okay. So instead, it accumulates. And here's the critical part. Her mind keeps telling her she should be fine. After all, she's still succeeding, still delivering, still being seen as capable. But her body has started to register something else. That leading now comes with exposure. That visibility has a cost. That speaking clearly might require bracing. And the body always notices unsafety before the mind agrees. So before she consciously decides to step back, her system begins to do it for her. She pauses longer before speaking, she thinks more, says less. She delays decisions that once felt straightforward. Not because she's disengaged, but because something in her no longer feels authorised. Authority doesn't usually collapse in one dramatic moment. It erodes in the body long before it disappears in behaviour. Before she stops speaking, she stops relaxing. Her shoulders stay a little higher, her breath becomes shallower in certain rooms, her jaw tightens when particular names appear on her calendar. She doesn't think, this isn't safe. She thinks, I'll just be careful. Careful with words, careful with timing, careful with how much of herself she brings forward. Over time, careful becomes habitual, and habitual becomes invisible. What's often missed here is that she's not withdrawing because she no longer cares. She's withdrawing because she cares deeply about her values, her integrity, her sense of self. When authority feels relationally unsafe, the system looks for a way to preserve dignity. And dignity doesn't always look like defiance. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like stepping back just enough to stop the internal friction. This is why telling women to be more confident at this stage often feels insulting. Confidence isn't the problem. The problem is that her authority no longer feels held. And authority, unlike confidence, is not purely internal, it's relational. It's shaped by whether your values are honoured or quietly bypassed. When those conditions erode, the sovereign doesn't argue, she conserves. She steps back to assess what's still hers to author, and in doing so, she creates space for another archetype to step forward, not as a replacement, but as a shield. This is often the moment women start to judge themselves. They tell themselves they should push through, that they shouldn't let it get to them, that they're being overly sensitive or dramatic even. But what if retreat isn't a flaw? What if it's information? Because when a woman who knows herself begins to pull back, it's rarely because she's lost her sense of self. It's because staying visible has started to cost her that self. The sovereign, at her core, is not reckless. She doesn't stay indefinitely in environments where authorship is compromised. She doesn't keep offering herself where her authority is quietly undermined. So she steps aside, not permanently, not loudly, but deliberately. Enough to protect what still matters, enough to preserve dignity. And this is where another archetype quietly enters the room, the Hermit. Let's slow right down and meet the Hermit properly. Not as avoidance, not as disengagement, but as protection. We'll explore what retreat is actually guarding, why pushing women back into visibility so often backfires, and what needs to happen before the sovereign can truly return. Because retreat is not the end of leadership, but it's a signal. And if we don't learn how to listen to it, we keep mistaking wisdom for weakness and protection for failure. The Hermit is often misunderstood. She's not rest. She's not reflection. She's not solitude chosen for nourishment or clarity. The Hermit appears when authority feels unsafe. She withdraws not because the world is loud, but because the cost of engagement has become too high. This withdrawal is rarely obvious. It doesn't look like absence. Often the Hermit is still present, physically, professionally, socially, but she's no longer available in the same way. She avoids difficult conversations. She delays decisions. She procrastinates on tasks that require visibility or ownership. She disappears into her own cave, not to recharge, but to reduce exposure. And this is a crucial distinction. There is a difference between a sovereign choosing retreat as an act of self-care and a hermit withdrawing as an act of protection. One restores capacity, the other preserves safety. From the outside, these can look identical. From the inside, they feel very different. The hermit isn't lazy. She isn't disengaged. She isn't avoiding responsibility. She's protecting something essential: identity, dignity, energy. When authority feels unstable, when authorship has been eroded, continuing to lead openly can feel like a form of self-betrayal. So the system adapts. The hermit narrows the field. She limits interaction. She reduces decision points. She pulls inwards so fewer parts of her are exposed to challenge or override. In doing so, she creates a sense of containment. And while this can look like withdrawal, what's actually happening is conservation. The hermit is buying time. Time to reassess, time to regroup, time to protect what still feels intact. This is why forcing the hermit back into visibility often backfires. Because from her perspective, visibility is not neutral, it's dangerous. This is where many leadership interventions go wrong. When a woman retreats, the response she receives is often immediate and well-intentioned. Are you okay? You seem disengaged. You need to put yourself out there more. Sometimes it's framed as support, sometimes as concern, sometimes as feedback. But almost always it misses the point. Because the hermit isn't responding to a lack of confidence, she's responding to a loss of safety. So when we offer solutions aimed at performance, more visibility, more assertiveness, more confidence, we're asking her to override the very signal that's trying to protect her. This creates internal conflict. Part of her knows she should be showing up. Another part knows that doing so feels risky. So she oscillates. She tries to push through briefly, then retreats again more firmly. And over time, this back and forth can deepen exhaustion and self-doubt. Not because she's incapable, but because she's being asked to perform authority without restoring the conditions that make authority possible. There's a particular pain that comes with being encouraged to reclaim power when your system no longer trusts the environment. It feels invalidating, like being told you're afraid when you're actually discerning, like being told you're stuck when you're actually protecting something precious. Many women internalise this misdiagnosis. They start to believe something's wrong with them, that they've become smaller, that they've lost their edge, that maybe they're no longer leadership material. But what's often happening is much simpler. They're no longer willing to lead without authorship. And until that authorship is restored, the hermit will remain, not as a punishment, but as a boundary. This is the moment many people want a strategy, a plan, a tool, a framework. But the return of the sovereign doesn't begin with action. It begins with permission. Permission to name what was lost. Permission to acknowledge where authority was compromised. Permission to stop pretending that retreat was a failure. The sovereign doesn't re-emerge because she's pushed. She re-emerges when safety returns. And safety here doesn't mean comfort. It means coherence. It means your values are no longer at odds with your behaviour. It means your voice is no longer punished for being clear. It means your authority is internally authorised again. Sometimes this happens through external change, a role shift, a new environment, a different structure. But for many women, the world doesn't change. The role stays the same. The organisation stays the same. The dynamics stay largely intact. And this is where the work becomes more subtle and more courageous, because the return of the sovereign doesn't always come with a change in circumstances. Sometimes it comes with a change in orientation. A woman may still be in the same meetings, still working with the same people, still navigating the same constraints. But something inside her has shifted. She stops trying to earn authority through performance. She stops explaining herself into safety. She stops offering more than she has consent to give. Not because she's hardened up, but because she's clarified. This kind of return is quiet. There's no announcement, no declaration, no visible transformation that other people can immediately recognise. What changes first is internal. She becomes more selective. She notices when she's about to override herself and pauses. She notices when she's about to disappear and names it. She notices when she's about to say yes out of fear and waits. Not to force a different behaviour, but to re-anchor herself in authorship. This is often uncomfortable because when the sovereign returns internally before conditions change externally, there can obviously be friction. Others may feel the shift before they understand it. Conversations may feel slightly more tense. Expectations may no longer be met in the same way. And this is where many women feel tempted to retreat again, to smooth things over, to explain, to soften the edge. But this moment, this subtle discomfort, is often a sign that something important is realigning. The sovereign isn't asking for permission anymore. She's checking in with herself first. And that changes the quality of leadership, even when nothing else has changed yet. This is also why the return to reign is rarely linear. It's not a single decision. It's a series of small internal authorisations. I don't need to justify this. I don't need to rush this. I don't need to disappear to stay safe. These moments don't look dramatic, but they accumulate. And over time, they create a different posture in the world, one that doesn't rely on force or control or withdrawal, but on alignment. Often it begins internally with a quiet reclaiming. I get to decide what I author. I get to decide where I lead. I get to decide what I no longer consent to. This is not a declaration, it's an orientation. And it's fragile at first. which is why the sovereign doesn't rush back onto the stage. She tests the ground slowly. One of the most important distinctions to make here is this. Reign is not dominance. It's not control. It's not proving. It's not reclaiming visibility at any cost. Reign is authorship embodied. It's the ability to stand in who you are without bracing, to lead without scanning for danger, to act without over-explaining or correcting. This doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't happen in isolation. The sovereign returns in relationship with self first and then with others, which is why the next phase of this journey matters so much, because once the sovereign begins to act again, she doesn't act alone. She meets the warrior. And that meeting determines whether power is used cleanly or collapses back into shadow. In this episode, we've explored what happens when authority becomes unsafe, why retreat makes sense, why the hermit appears, and why pushing women back into visibility often deepens the withdrawal. But we haven't yet explored what happens when the sovereign tries to move again, when she takes a step forward, when she sets a boundary, when she decides to act. Because reclaiming authority is one thing. Using it without tipping into control, aggression, or self-betrayal is another. And that's where we're going next. In the next episode, we'll explore the tension between the warrior and the tyrant. Because courage without control is not weakness, and control without courage is not leadership. Thanks for joining me on the Archetype Effect. If this episode sparked an insight, share it with a woman who leads, or leave a review so more women can find these conversations. Until next time, lead with purpose and power that feels like you.